When dealing with the subject of miracles, it's not so much the miracles of Jesus that 21st century man has a problem with, but, well, miracles. You see, our society suffers from what one Christian apologist has described as the Hume hangover. That is the belief that nothing happens that is not consistent with the laws of nature. In other words, everything that happens must have a natural explanation. And if we understand miracles as they're commonly understood, as any event that cannot be explained by natural processes or phenomena, and which requires a supernatural agent to perform it, then we can see why so many people are dubious when perhaps for the first time they read the Gospels and the accounts contained therein of the miracles attributed to Jesus. Now, you may never have heard of David Hume. It matters little. His ideas and those of the other Enlightenment thinkers permeate the popular culture and mindset today. You might not have realised exactly what it was you were drinking, but the hangover and its symptoms are proof that it was something highly intoxicating. Well, what are the symptoms? First, when confronted with the miracles of Jesus, or any claimed miracle for that matter, your initial reaction will be to think that there must be a natural explanation, and that the believing individuals are either too slow-witted, ignorant, or just plain gullible to realise it. After all, when it comes to the miracles of Jesus, the people who witnessed them lived 2,000 years ago and didn't have the benefit of a modern, sophisticated university education. Most of them could barely even read or write. So, do I believe the unenlightened statements of a group of dead peasant fishermen, or the assertions of highly acclaimed, educated, modern thinkers who argue that miracles just don't happen? Well, the truth is, ancient doesn't mean stupid and modern doesn't mean right. Though our knowledge base has indeed increased in 2,000 years, the human mind and intellect has essentially remained the same. Skepticism is not the reserve of educated 21st century man, and even among the disciples of Jesus there were those who also required reasonable proof before they were willing to believe. Of course, the flip side to the natural explanation coin is to argue, in the absence of any explanation, that at present our knowledge base is limited, but one day science will have advanced sufficiently to show just exactly how Jesus did it. The explanation will come, just give it a little bit of time. The problem here, however, is even if science is one day able to explain just how, for example, Jesus managed to feed the 5,000 with just 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, how did a man who lived in the distant past, in a culture lost for that knowledge, manage to achieve it? Where did that knowledge come from? You would have to conclude that Jesus was indeed, at the very least, an extraordinary man, and that his ability to do everything he did at such a remote time in the past was, well, nothing short of miraculous. The second symptom of a Hume hangover would be to argue that some miracles can be explained by sheer coincidence and statistics. Take, for example, the occasion on which Jesus instructs Peter to cast his net into the Sea of Galilee and examine the mouth of the first fish he pulls out of that net. In it, he tells Peter he will find the coin necessary to pay both his and Peter's temple tax. Peter does this, and hey presto, it's exactly as Jesus says. Now, when you know that there is a fish in the Sea of Galilee, often caught with various objects in its mouth, things like bottle tops, coins and the like, a fish which is known today as St. Peter's fish, you might argue that Jesus just got, well, lucky. Statistically, this was likely to happen, and it was just pure coincidence that Jesus on this occasion struck gold. Now, the fact that Peter caught a fish with a coin in its mouth is not in itself miraculous. What is miraculous is that, following Jesus' specific instructions to the letter, at the moment when it was necessary for them to pay the tax, that the very coin they needed to pay that tax was in the mouth of the very fish Jesus said it would be. Statistically, I don't know what the odds on that are. I'm no statistician, and I don't have the data available to me. But the fact that you may be able to calculate mathematically what those odds are doesn't in itself negate that what took place may indeed have been a miracle. Coincidences happen all the time, and not all of them are miraculous. In fact, most of them probably aren't. But on this occasion, it would be hard to dismiss this event as simply mundane. Third, those suffering under the influence of Hume might resort to arguing that Jesus' miracles were nothing short of a clever con, that Jesus was the magician extraordinaire, and not unlike some of his modern-day counterparts, people like David Blaine in the USA or Derren Brown in the United Kingdom. Combine this with a heavy dose of uneducated, illiterate, ignorant, first-century superstition and gullibility, and you have the makings of a would-be religion. Of course, if this was your belief, you would be forced to argue that the man himself, Jesus, was supremely evil, for on the basis of deception, he proclaimed a message he knew would bring ridicule, suffering, and death to countless of his future followers, knowing that all along, all he was offering was the opportunity to have nothing more than a slice of a great but non-existent pie in the sky. As McDowell has observed, if, when Jesus was making his claims, he knew that he was not God, then he was lying and deliberately deceiving his followers. But if he was a liar, then he was also a hypocrite, because he told others to be honest whatever the cost, while he himself taught and lived a colossal lie. More than that, he was a demon, because he told others to trust him for their eternal destiny. If he couldn't back up his claims and knew it, then he was unspeakably evil. Could such a man really have inspired his followers to do the great good and extraordinary things that they did? Again, as McDowell observes, wherever Jesus has been proclaimed, lives have been changed for the good, nations have changed for the better, thieves are made honest, alcoholics are cured, hateful individuals become channels of love, unjust persons become just. It is hard to conclude, after observing Jesus in the Gospels, that he was an evil man. This simply doesn't wash. Secondly, the miracles described in the Gospels are significantly different to the magic tricks performed by well-known magicians. Unlike these performers, Jesus never sought publicity and on many occasions cautioned those who'd witnessed or benefited from his miracles not to publicize what he had done. Even though Jesus received it, he didn't seek the spotlight. In addition, whereas performers' stunts like those of David Blaine or Derren Brown have a carefully planned, orchestrated quality about them, the miracles attributed to Jesus often simply happened. He's confronted by situations he has no precognition of, and is asked to intervene. Unlike magicians, he doesn't engineer those situations. The situations simply confront him. In order to be able to respond on the spur of the moment and in the manner he did, without any trace that he was simply using sleight of hand, without making any mistakes, he would have to have been an individual without precedent and without repetition in the whole of history. Well, you might argue that it wasn't Jesus who was guilty of deception, but actually his disciples. They fabricated the whole account of the miracles. Well, I would refer you to my 2 previous videos on the trustworthiness of the New Testament. But one would also have to provide an answer or answers as to why many of his followers were prepared to suffer and die for what they knew to be a lie. The truth is, not one of Jesus' opponents was ever able to expose him as a charlatan. The best they could do was to accept his acts as miraculous, but smear them by attributing them to a demonic agent. So these then are the 3 symptoms of the Hume hangover that I have identified. The claim that there must be a natural explanation, the appeal to coincidence and statistics, and the accusation that, well, Jesus was just a very clever con artist. In my next video, I'll come back to the subject of miracles in order to look more closely at the foundation of David Hume's assertion that nothing happens that is not consistent with the laws of nature. I will also seek to explain more fully the Christian basis for the possibility of the occurrence of miracles. Thank you for listening.